Okay, so I put up a video about cutting and knife combat and making sure you're cutting through a target instead of pushing through a target, because I had some students who were having an issue with that. And one of my students asked me a really good question after looking at it and said, well, what about the flick or the snap cut? Good, valid question. So I told him I'd put up a video about that. Really, it's got two answers to it. And at first, the answers are going to kind of seem to contradict each other, right? So in case you're watching or you don't know, right, a flick or a snap cut is basically a technique where instead of actually cutting or slicing or chopping, what you're doing is you are literally flicking your knife out or snapping your knife out, right? I call it a flick. I developed this from my sport fencing days, where we used to take the foil and flick and get the blade to bend and come down and hit the person in the back. So that's where I developed it from. Other martial arts, it's not unique to me. I'm not the first to develop it by any means. A lot of people call it a snap cut because you're reaching out and you're snapping with the wrist. All right. So whether you call it a flick or a snap cut really makes no difference. All right. Same basic idea. But that's the principle. You're extending and you're tapping with the wrist and the fingers as opposed to a big strike. So that would indicate, as my student suggested, that you're not slicing through, you are pushing. So here are my two answers. First answer is that the flick or the snap cut is the exception to the rule. You're right. In essence, you aren't slicing through, you are hitting. You're actually almost doing a mini chop, right? You're doing like a chop with just the tip and your fingers. So if you think like an axe or a tomahawk, if I grab a tomahawk real quick here, okay, my very beat up tomahawk, right? When you hit with an axe, thunk, you're hitting, okay? Same basic idea with a flick. Boom, you're hitting and recoiling quickly. So that's one. That's why I like these Americanized Tonto blades. So this is a Spec Plus series. It's the 8-inch one by Ontario Knife Company. Unfortunately not made anymore. But if you look at the Americanized Tontos, they have this secondary point right here, which is absolutely brutal for that type of cut. It's really a very specialized blade shape. Ooh, allergies on video, terrible. I should edit that out, but I won't. All right, so I like those. Now, who invented these and when they were invented and everything else, I don't get into all that, right? So that's the idea. In a snap cut or a flick, you're reaching out and you're just taking and burying that tip point in and retracting it quickly. Boom, it's a very quick technique. Not every shot you do needs to take a man's arm off at the wrist or needs to, go through. Especially if you're talking knife duels, where it's knife on knife, right? Boom, one little shot might be enough to defang the snake. Even in modern combat, though, where you're probably not going to be going knife against knife, you'll probably be going knife against unarmed, or knife against other weapon or something. It doesn't necessarily need to be that the first shot kills. Because that shot is so fast, I can go 1-2 and follow up quickly. And I can hit my first snap cut, get whatever I need to out of the way, defend the first thing, and then take with the second shot. All right. So that's answer number one. It's the exception to the rule. It's like a mini chop where you're hitting it. Answer number two, you should be slicing through and doing it. Because even with the snap cut, as I extend, you can do it kind of two ways. You can extend and instantly retract. But if you really look at it, if I turn sideways, what you're doing as you extend, your wrist is doing the cutting motion there at that very last point. So if I use this as an example, it kind of depends where you hit. If I flick here, and that's where my wrist goes, right? Boom, boom, I am still getting some of that cutting motion. And if you're really good and you practice, you can still flick and draw in, as opposed to flicking and drawing back, right? It's most common to start with this before getting that, right? So again, it doesn't have to take a man's arm off at the wrist. It's a quick shot. I will say, something like this, probably the right person still could take an arm off. Even a small pocket knife, though, will go down to the bone with this type of technique, all right? So now, again, pool noodles, terrible targets. The best way to practice this is, again, either meat, or what I've done is you go buy rubber gloves for like doing the dishes at the grocery store, those long, thick old rubber gloves that like our mothers and grandmothers and everything you wore. Make up ballistics gel and put dowel in the ballistics gel to represent the bones here and small ones. And I've done that. And I'll tell you right now, my little 4-inch pocket knife I used to carry goes right down to the bone. Okay, so I'll just show you two little examples of the flick or the snap cut here. I've got one facing out as if this were like an opponent's arm. Okay, if he had a knife and I was trying to kind of knife duel and get around and stuff. Keep in mind, when I do pool noodles, I don't attach them very securely. That way I have to be incredibly quick with my technique because they're floppy, they're gonna fall, they're not really solidly attached. So if I do this and I come in here, okay, well, did I really take his arm off or anything? No, I barely lacerated. However, that barely laceration on the inside of the wrist or the outside, right? If I do it and I try to get my little extension here, well, now you can see that. Let's see if I can turn it so you can see. Okay, I started to take off a chunk here, I took off a chunk here, right? So again, it's not that full shot. If I have an upward target, I can show you the same thing. Okay, and just that hit, see if I can turn it so the camera can see, right? Nearly takes things off. It's an amazing cut when done properly. So that time I extended and did draw back, and you'll see I actually got an incredibly clean cut from it. All right, and it can be done from multiple angles. It can be done from multiple angles. Okay, again, I didn't kill him. I think it's gonna be slightly below the camera here, but I took a giant chunk out. That's not something you want. And it's way faster than one of these type of things, right? So this can be a very, very good, valid technique that's very fast, especially with something like this where you're digging that extra point in, right? No, I didn't chop a guy's arm off. But if he had a weapon and I did that to his arm, is he still going to be holding that weapon?